Okay, so I wanted to talk about the Spratly Islands. I thought that the discussion question was pretty interesting. Uh, uh, who should control the islands? So, anyhow, there's a few major claimants of the islands, including, as you can see, China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, and the Philippines. There's also Brunei, um, which falls right in there, that tiny country down by Malaysia here. So let's start with the United Nations. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea basically governs who has authority over the waters surrounding the country and then international waters and whatnot. But basically, what it says is that every country has control over 12 nautical miles of the coastline and also extending up to 200 nautical miles, granted these exclusive economic zones, and also, um, you know, the existing uh, continental shelves and those resources are in control of the country adjacent. So, um, just as an interesting note, the U.S. did not sign the Convention on the Law of the Sea because they didn't agree with this certain part that basically says that the international waters and the resources under them, mineral resources, is under control of the UN, and they'll designate who can or cannot utilize or exploit those resources. The U.S. didn't like that and therefore didn't sign it. So anyhow, most of the countries involved in the Spratly Islands dispute have um, signed this agreement. So starting with China, they did sign it. They also have a large claim over the area. As you can see, the red line delineates their claim, which is essentially the entire South China Sea, and they're claiming that on the basis that they discovered it or inhabited it, over 2,000 years ago. As you can see, back to the 2nd century before the Common Era. So um, those claims, though, are not recognized by the international community or the United Nations. The United Nations really wants to see that the islands were occupied, which they weren't by China, really, and so those claims are sort of bogus as far as most people are concerned, except for the Chinese. So Vietnam is kind of the next biggest claimant, and they control the most features out of any country, including reefs and cays and a few islands. 21 features in total as of now. So they've sort of been occupying that area for a while, back to the 16th century. They had been sending these flotillas out there and surveying and using resources and whatnot. So they kind of have a greater historical claim than, at least than China does, from what I've read. So, but they are claiming well beyond the 200 nautical mile limit that the UN um, allows, and they haven't really occupied the islands, effectively year round or anything. So I don't know. I don't think the UN's really recognizing those claims either. Uh, so the Philippines also has a claim, and they are basically claiming within their 200 nautical mile limit. Um, they're occupying a few of those islands, and as we saw in some of the videos, they're sort of encountering some skirmishes with other nations over the legitimacy of those claims. Chinese, I believe, were grinding up a bunch of reef in the Philippine claimed territory, kind of as a screw you to the Philippines, it seemed like. Anyhow, the U.S. doesn't necessarily officially back the Philippines' territorial claim, but effectively they do, and I think that partially due to not wanting the Chinese to extend military power in the region. Also, there's Taiwan, which surprisingly controls the largest of the Spratlys, and really, as you can see on this map, only controls that one island. And they're active. The military of Taiwan is active in the region and was recently conducting some live fire drills. That's kind of stirred up some trouble lately, pretty recently in the last couple months, I believe. And there's also Malaysia, which has a kind of a smaller claim, but from this map you can see they're sort of extending their claim over into Brunei's territory, which that green territory of Brunei is basically what the UN delineated for them, and that's all they're claiming anyway. And the Malaysians are claiming that based on the continental shelf rights, as I mentioned earlier, from the UN. And then there's Brunei. Like I said, they're not claiming any islands really. They're just claiming the sea space that is designated to them by the UN, I believe. So, and they're just trying to maintain that from the other countries that are making claims. Probably China's. I think China's claim extends all the way into Brunei's, actually. So really, who should have control over the islands? Seems like it's really up to the UN's convention. Nobody has had any historical occupants of the islands. Really, nobody's effectively occupying them. As far as residential, is really a lot of like military occupation throughout the area. So, in my opinion, these blue lines on this map, basically that the UN has made, seems like the way to break it up. But because I believe Brunei, which isn't really being combative, I don't believe in the situation. Brunei and Taiwan didn't sign the convention's treaty, but the Philippines, China, Vietnam, Malaysia all did, and I guess they're not recognizing it, even though they signed it. So, who should have control? Probably the people that have that 200 nautical mile limit as delineated by these blue lines, but it's probably not the way it's going to go. China's got a large military, and they probably will end up exerting the most force in the region, barring any international intervention, really. I don't think the Vietnamese or the Taiwanese or the Philippines will go down without a fight here, but considering all the mineral resources there, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. So that's really all I got. There's a lot of information out there. It's hard to put together in a 10-minute video, but you get the idea. There's a lot of dispute over who owns what. So, like I said, we'll see. Thanks for listening.